Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode, this week with Mark Metze. Hi Mark, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, it's a great day to be a Scrum Master.
Absolutely, especially on Wednesdays, because it's all about change, which leads us to the question, right? So on Change Wednesdays, we like to talk about the practices, the approaches, the lessons learned relating to change. So we want you to tell us a story of a change process you were involved with. I mean, it could be individual level, team level, organizational level. It doesn't really matter, but we do want to go through that story and understand the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Sure. So this story involves sprint goals. I was working with a team that was not utilizing sprint goals, but were utilizing Scrum. And it wasn't their fault because I hadn't been the one to really explain to them the value of sprint goals and how to use them and what their value were. So I roll in one day and off the cuff, like I often do, and have made the mistake before, I proclaimed to the team that effective next sprint, we're going to be creating sprint goals, just like the Scrum Guide tells us to. And I went ahead and didn't ask anyone. I just updated the team dashboard and I put a placeholder for sprint goals at the top. I had to be determined, and boy, was super energized and couldn't wait for everyone to tell me how good of a job it was. And the team responded and said, no, we're not. And didn't expect that at all. I said, but you realize the Scrum Guide says you have to use sprint goals, right?
The Scrum
It
Guide
doesn't get any more simple than that.
Yeah, and of course it worked, right? Like when you say the Scrum Guide says, everybody listens.
Yeah, their response was, we got it. We're good. We don't need the overhead of setting a sprint goal. We know what we're doing. Just leave us alone. Well, Vasco, I tried a couple of different angles, but just wasn't successful in convincing them. So, I just threw up my arms and I said, okay, you know what? You guys win. I'm just going to take the sprint goals off the dashboard. We're not going to talk about them, and we're just going to go ahead like we had. And I was honestly pretty defeated because I'm the Scrum Master of the team. I'm supposed to be teaching the team what Scrum is and how to use it, how to implement it. And my team doesn't trust me. They don't trust that I know what I'm doing. And if you see a common theme, it's all about me. What am I worth? What am I bringing to the team? Well, something unexpected happened in the following sprint. And I promise you, I'm not creative enough or smart enough to make this come to fruition. But I was leading the sprint retrospective. And it was one where the team didn't have anything to demonstrate or anything to share at the sprint review. So we talked about that. And we found out that one of the developers picked up a user story that seemed interesting to them. And they ended up spending a lot more time on it than anyone had ever expected. And so somebody on the team asked, why in the world did you pick up that user story when we had others that are higher priority? I mean, we prioritize them in sprint planning, and top is most important, the bottom is the least important. And the developer just said, well, I just kind of thought we had to finish them all. So I just picked one that I thought was interesting. And that one sort of had my name on it. And then another developer spoke up and said, if we would have created a goal for the sprint, we would have realized that this doesn't align to the goal, and we wouldn't have even picked that story up in the first place. We would achieve the goal first, and then we would have taken on that story. So ever since that point, the team has been using sprint goals, and they've been very successful at using them. And despite my best efforts to try to hammer it into the team and say, because the Scrum Guide says so is why you should do it, the team just kind of had to feel that pain for themselves to really, truly feel and understand why, what the value of them were.
Yeah, absolutely. This story has quite a few insights. So let's start with the first, right? You don't push change. When it's not necessary, it will fall flat on its face, period. Maybe they don't actively say no, like in this story, but passively, and if nothing else, by omission, things will just fall through the cracks. And then the other story, which is kind of implicit, I would say hidden in the story you just told, is that even when we screw up, even when we fail at creating change, we are giving people permission to talk about the topic we discussed, right? So what you did also allowed that team member to say, hey, actually, maybe goals are not such a bad idea. Maybe we should actually do it, right? And of course, it took that trigger of failing a sprint, if you will, and which is, it's normal. There will always be that kind of triggers. But I don't know if unwittingly or wittingly, you had prepared the team to be ready for that retro, even though you were trying to kind of add sprint goals to the process. But in fact, what you were doing is making people aware of them and getting the permission to talk about it a couple of sprints later when the proverbial hit the fan, because that's really what we do, right? So as a change technique, one of the things I would like to highlight from this story, which is a tip for our listeners, is that even when you fail, you're preparing the future of something that will succeed, like in this particular case, and giving people permission, maybe people in the team who already want that change, but don't have courage to talk about it. By you talking about it, you also open the door for that conversation to evolve and for the team to accept that, hey, maybe this is something for us after all. What do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree wholeheartedly. I agree with that. So I'll just add one last point that through reflection I found. And what I found was whenever I find myself saying, you need to do this because the Scrum Guide says so, I started thinking back and thinking about maybe with my parents, perhaps with a teacher when I was in elementary or high school, a sports coach. What was my reaction when they told me to do something and I said, I don't want to do it? And they asked why, and they said, because I said so. That was essentially what I was trying to do to my team. And that is never going to stick.
Yeah, we know how well that works, especially if you have teenage kids and you're listening to this. It is a great story, though. So thank you for sharing that with us, Mark.
Absolutely.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.